Elara. In a world where water is more precious than gold, she is a keeper of small hopes. She stands at the edge of her village, her patched blue dress covered in the dust of 1,000 dry days. Her eyes, wide and soulful, search the horizon for a single gray cloud, but find only the shimmering heat of a sun that refuses to set. Elara knelt by the only thing she truly owned, a tiny, wilting sprout, struggling to survive in a cracked clay pot. She held her heavy wooden dipper over it, watching the very last drops of her family's water ration trickle out. It wasn't enough. In this land, even the bravest plants were losing the fight against the great drought. She carried her empty bucket to the center of the village, to the ancient stone well that had once been the heart of their community. Now, it was just a hollow throat of dust. Elara peered into the darkness, hoping to hear the splash of water, but heard only the dry rattle of the wind against the stones. The village was fading, just like her little sprout. The sun began to dip, turning the sky into a bruised purple and blazing orange. It was a beautiful sunset, but in Elara's village, beauty was a curse. It meant another day without rain. She looked out at the skeletal trees and the husks of abandoned homes, feeling the weight of a silence that was far too heavy for a 10-year-old to carry. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the cracked earth. Out of the haze of the heat emerged a traveler, stooped and covered in a tattered brown cloak. He looked as though he were made of the desert itself. He didn't ask for gold or direction. He simply looked at Elara with tired, ancient eyes and held out a withered hand. A choice was coming, one that would change the fate of the desert forever. Out of the heat emerged a traveler, stooped and covered in a tattered brown cloak. He looked as though he were made of the desert itself, his skin the color of parched clay. The old man reached out a gnarled, trembling hand toward Elara's wooden dipper. He didn't speak, but his eyes held the weight of 1,000 thirsty miles. In a village where every drop was guarded like a diamond, he was asking for the impossible. Elara looked down at the last of her family's water. If she gave it away, her tiny sprout would surely die. If she kept it, this traveler might not see another sunrise. The desert had hardened many hearts, but Elara's was still soft. With a steady hand, she lifted the dipper. "Take it," she whispered. As the water touched the stranger's lips, the harsh orange sun seemed to pause in the sky. She was giving away her survival, and yet she felt lighter than she had in years. As the traveler drank, the air around his weathered head began to shimmer. Tiny, swirling motes of emerald green light danced in the dust. The rasp in his throat smoothed into a sound like rustling leaves. Something ancient was waking up. The traveler reached into his tattered cloak and pulled out a single, pulsing golden seed. It glowed with a warm, internal light that made the sunset look pale. He placed it carefully into Elara's small, dusty palm. "Kindness," he whispered, his voice now a melody of wind and rain, "is the only seed that can grow in a wasteland." He looked at her with a quiet knowing, as if he had traveled across time just to find this one heart. Elara stared at the glowing gift. It vibrated with a life force the village had forgotten. It wasn't just a seed, it was a promise. She felt the warmth of it spreading through her fingers, chasing away the cold fear of the drought. The stranger vanished into the haze, and Elara knew what she had to do. Ignoring the skeptical whispers of the weary villagers watching from the shadows, she knelt in the very center of the parched square and began to dig. As she covered the seed, a single pure tear fell from Elara's cheek, soaking into the dry soil. It was her final sacrifice, the last moisture she had to give. She whispered a silent plea to the earth, and for the first time, the wind didn't rattle. It listened. A low rumble shook the earth, not the dry crack of heat, but a deep, rhythmic heartbeat. From the spot where Elara had buried the seed, a tiny, glowing emerald shoot broke through the iron-hard ground.